We all have stories about money. Some are funny, some are embarrassing, others make us cringe, while others leave us empowered. Far too often, these stories are left unshared. Money is such a taboo topic, but quiet as it's kept, our experiences with money are more common than we think. When we share stories, we feel less alone in our experiences, and we discover new strategies for navigating life with money. I'm your host, Melissa Mazard. You're listening to Memories of Money, where our guests reveal their financial secrets and where you will learn practical lessons and principles for a life of financial health and prosperity. Can physical trauma affect the way we handle money? In this episode, our guest shares her story about how a Halloween tragedy led to impulsive financial behaviors and $40,000 of credit card debt. Continue listening to hear more of her journey through healing and financial growth.
I'm drawn to the first memory of understanding that you spend different kinds of money for different things. When I was in third grade, I was kind of a early bloomer a little bit, and we went to Gap Kids, which at that point was sort of brand new and very exciting. And I went from wearing sort of little kid outfits all in one day to having all sorts of really cool black leather leggings and sort of grown-up kid kind of stuff. And I remember that it was the first real fun shopping trip that I had ever been on with my mom that was really like, wow, we're girls in this together. And I remember that at the end, she got out a different card. I didn't realize that it was a credit card, but I knew that it was sort of bright and shiny and different than the usual bank card, which she kept in this really old sort of ratty paper case that I guess you kept your bank cards in those days. And I remember that she paid for it with that. And so for some reason, it really stuck with me that you paid for maybe the important things, maybe the kind of the fun and important things with a different type of money than you paid for the peanut butter and jelly and the bread and soccer cleats. It's a lot different when you're buying your first pair of leather leggings as a fourth grader. You're in the store with the loud music and it feels like a completely different experience. So I think that was my first realization that there are different kinds of money and there are different kinds of ways of paying for things. And kind of unfortunately, that one of them, which of course is the credit card, is much more exciting looking and fun looking than the other one. Now that I'm really kind of going back into my memory, the difference, it wasn't even a debit card. So this is the mid 90s, early 90s. She was actually writing out a check. So there was a credit card and a paper check. And so I think that was why the difference was a little bit more obvious. And yes, the card was very shiny. I noticed the times that she got the shiny, fun credit card out were after those mother-daughter bonding shopping times when you're sort of finishing up and you're so excited, had a really fun day. And then you're also getting to leave with all these fun gifts and prizes. In my mind, it was almost sort of like, this has been a really big trip. This has been a really good trip because we were buying things for me. When I saw that card come out, it had a little bit to do in my early marketing and selling ability of how much can I get out of this shopping trip. It was this little signal to me, not only of, whoa, this must be a big one, but also sort of, Kirby, you did a really good job convincing back there. What were some techniques that worked for you? Let's put those in our back pocket for next time. I remember feeling this little pang of excitement of sort of, let's see, when you see that card come out. Interestingly, the way that those shopping trips went was very different from the messages that I heard at home, which were all about hard work and you work for what you want. We had allowances and chores, and I really, really always wanted to buy the next thing. So I was constantly scrubbing the bathroom for my mom or doing extra things. And there was a lot of really good messaging coming from my parents. Somehow there was this alternate universe that existed on these shopping trips. It was just really, really fun for me and my mom to be out there doing this thing that was just ours. And I think we both got carried away. I wish that we had had money conversations about our finances, not about finances. We didn't ever really discuss what we had. We talked a lot about it in conceptual ways, and we talked a lot about it in terms of, I want $25 for this. Well, then you do this amount of work. And I think that that was great. But for me, what would have been really helpful would have been put that in its place with the rest of the picture. Because as much as I wanted the dress, both shirts and both pairs of pants and everything else, if I had known where those things fit in the budget, I certainly would not have viewed it as sort of a victory. I would have viewed it as a real thing. If I had had to think about the money in terms of something else, in terms of our actual life, that might have gotten me a lot farther. Kids can do a lot with understanding the family budget and the family finances, and that can really lead them down a path of, this money that we spend is real. Kids are very aware, much more aware than we may give them credit for. We talked a lot about work because my dad worked all the time. He got up at 2 or 3 in the morning to do grant writing and other sort of things that he could do at home until about 5, when he would drive from Western Massachusetts to Boston to work at Boston Foundation or Bank of America all day in their grants department. So he would find all these organizations that had the qualifications to get grant money. For a lot of these organizations that are doing such amazing, wonderful things with young mothers and domestic violence survivors, he was really in his element when he was helping people. He did extra work for those places just pro bono, just because he really wanted to. I learned that the reason why he did jobs for big corporations were to pay for our tuition. The jobs that he really, really loved and got his joy from were the jobs that he really made very, very little or no money from, working to help people or help them qualify for these grants. The first real budget that my dad did with me that really stuck with me was a budget that he did with me when we were finding my first apartment after college. We found it and it was a little over budget. It was in Boston. It was in a very safe neighborhood and very close to public transportation and other things that a dad would want. And so we were trying to make it work. And so we really went through every single expense that I was going to have. And then I lived that budget for several months. Several times I worked at a clothing store. I did marketing for them in the winter when they didn't have as many summer employees. I would go in to Newbury Street, which is a sort of a Fifth Avenue version in Boston. And I would be in the fancy store with the dresses, and you're just there all day and 70% off discount for being an employee. I would buy the dress. And then you don't have the money to go buy a ton of new food. Well, so I had oatmeal in my cabinet and other things. And so I would just have oatmeal for a couple of days and I would have the dress. And I remember thinking, I trade for 3 days or so of having this oatmeal. Well, that's worth it right now. That's okay. I certainly was not deprived of nutrition or anything, but I was living this. I was living the budget. It was providing a lot of moments that were really crucial. Unfortunately, it was a little bit late because I had already graduated from college and I already did have this credit card debt that I was sort of accruing. About 6 months into my living in Boston, I met the man who was going to become my husband, and I kind of knew that right away, and so did he, which is really lucky because otherwise I would have been chasing him around. I started to basically live at his apartment, and by about 2 months later, my dad told me, "Well, come on, just move in with him full time. We don't want to pay, rent for both places." He had met the guy in question, and he loved him, which was different from past boyfriends who he chased around with shotgun practically. Things got a little bit murky, or a lot murky, when merging of finances occurred. And I never, again, really had that very, very, very clear, this is what you are bringing in. This is what this costs for your apartment. This is what your electric bill costs. I know that I obviously could have written that all out myself and worked with my husband-to-be to do that. I should have. But when you have a backup plan, i.e., honey, I'm a little short right now. I bought a dress and I'm going to be eating oatmeal. All of a sudden, he went to the supermarket. It's not as obvious as it is when you are you and you're paying your bills. And if you don't pay your bills, you have the food in your cabinet and that's it. That lesson for me, if it had been longer and really become like a muscle, as opposed to just sort of something that I was trying out. I think that that would have been really, really helpful. But obviously, one does need to learn to go to the next step, which is if you're going to cohabitate with somebody and merge your finances in some ways and not merge your finances in others, you need to have that discussion. Yes, we talked about who was going to pay for what, and we did that. But there wasn't an actual, how much do we think we should spend each week for things that we're going to do on the weekend? There wasn't an actual number. We just sort of spent it. He's 5 years older than I am. So whereas this was my very first experience, and I was still in my first year of living on my own, he had been living on his own for 5 more years and having an actual career. About a year or so after I met him, I began to come home with, hey, guess what? These things that we're doing at the office, there's all this information about money. At the time, he had credit cards that he was, it was sort of the thing where the envelope comes and you know that it's in there, so you don't even open it because the bill is there. And he heard me spouting off about all this credit education, all the good things that you should do and the things that you shouldn't do. And he started to turn those habits around. So maybe I thought that that was really great and that was good for our future. My dad and my husband and I all really felt that it would be really good to go into our marriage debt-free. And that was kind of a huge thing because I had $40,000 in debt. This debt was all credit card. It was all shopping debt. And the debt, as much as it would be, I think, somewhat easy to look at what I've said so far and say, oh, she took those experiences with her mom where she went shopping and the shiny golden card and joy, joy, joy. That would be pretty easy to say. That would be pretty easy to assume that that's where that debt came from. And you know what? I assumed that that's where my debt came from for 20 years. I assumed and I felt ashamed, more than ashamed, like really terrible about myself as a person that I had let this happen, that I had made this happen for 20 years. For my father, he had done everything humanly possible to tell me not to go to stores and get store cards and spend that money at that high of an interest rate. Don't ever buy things that you can't immediately pay back. Maybe don't have a credit card at all if you can't handle that. All the lessons. And again, it would be really easy. And for 20 years, I spent feeling really, really, really terrible about my dad's file that I found. I was given after my dad had passed away. It was labeled Kirby's Money Problem. It had the statements in it and the this and that, different plans for how to pay it off and just all the documentation. But here's the thing. I'm in this field for 15 years. And I am learning and I am helping my husband, helping people even in my own house and hopefully people out in the real world with their money and designing things that help people to feel motivated to do something about that feeling of feeling overpowered by your money and feeling controlled by past decisions. But I didn't put something together. And one day I was quite literally in a hole in my backyard because my son likes to dig. And we have in our very back garden past our lawn have dug this enormous system of trenches and other things. He was also hosting a Halloween mansion experience, which one needed to have these really deep, for like a first grader, up to your shoulders high trenches so that they would walk through and feel like they were underground. So I'm in the trench. I'm in digging in the trench. And it's October. And things are getting close to Halloween and the Halloween mansion experience. I've been digging for a while. And I guess I was really ruminating over life. And it occurred to me that it was going to be the 20-year anniversary of when I was raped. I was raped on Halloween in 2002. I was a freshman in college, and it was totally dehumanizing in multiple different ways, and something that I gained a full-on diagnosis of PTSD from and was later treated with EMDR therapy, which I can't recommend highly enough. A therapist who's trained in this helps you almost meditate to a point where you are able to, for very, very brief, like 15 seconds in a safe environment where you kind of are able to say, yes, I am safe. I'm keeping my eye movements still. I'm focusing on a point sort of off in the distance so that you're not feeding the fight, flight, or freeze response, which I guess involves a lot of rapid eye movements. Basically, you're keeping your body in a place where you and it are trying not to have that response. But in your mind, for 15 seconds, at very, very limited amounts of time, you are putting yourself into the parts of the event where you have gotten your trauma from. And then you are carefully sort of brought out by the therapist. You're trying as much as you can to not lead your mind the way that we usually lead our minds when we're thinking about something that bothers us. Instead of justifying something or, oh my God, that was so stupid that you were in that room with that guy. Oh my gosh, what were you wearing that night? Oh my God. Nope, you're just thinking about as it happened. What random thoughts pop into your head before you're taken out of that little moment by the therapist and asked her to what came into your mind during that? And then you explore that, because the most non-connected things will come into your mind, or sometimes things you really don't expect. So basically, it's about finding out what really triggers you, as opposed to what you may think triggers you and why. In my case, there was a lot of things that came to me about anger that I had, and that was not directed at the guy who raped me or his friend who was apparently at the other side of the door, and there was a banging at the door. A year later, I'm a sophomore in college, and I'm thinking through those moments, and I come up with, in the days and weeks and months afterwards, I was mad at all get up at my parents, at my father in particular, because I wished that he had come running through the door and rescued me. I wished that he had displayed anger to a point of, I wish that he had wanted to kill these guys. I wish that he had told me that he wanted to. I wished that he had. There was a lot that came from that, but this breakthrough with my dad was a little harder because what can he do? What came out of it was I was pissed. And actually, I told him, I know this is a weird conversation to have, but I'm doing this therapy now, and I wish that you had this, and I wish you had that. And I wish that we could go into that dorm room and fucking destroy it. I wish that we could take hammers and axes to the walls and destroy it. Now, here's the part where my dad is the best person in the world, because he did fundraising for the college that I went to. He had a long relationship with them. They were renovating the dorm. And my dad, Mr. Not Talk About His Feelings, pretty shy, went down to the physical plant, and he talked to them, and he said, this is something happened to my daughter in this room, and we want to go in and wreck it. You're renovating and you're doing demo. And they said, yeah. Basically, at the conclusion of my EMDR therapy with my therapist and my mother outside the door, my dad and I went into the room and closed that door that had been the source of so much control and evil and badness and horror. And we spray painted the walls. We spray painted the names of people I know who had been assaulted. And then we hacked the names out of so that no one could see it. I have the doorknobs. This is the doorknobs, both sides. I still had it. I almost got rid of it recently. I control that door now. No one else controls that door but me. My dad made that happen. And that's awesome. I don't know that many parents that would be willing to go to those lengths, especially in terms of saying to others what had happened. And that was just fucking awesome. So at the time, doorknobs and all, I kind of thought, I'm cured. I'm still mad that this happened, but I'm okay. I'm going to move forward. And I did, but something else had happened that I didn't realize was connected for 20 years until I'm out in that hole, my backyard, digging away. Oh my gosh, it's been 20 years. So much has happened. Bang. I have this realization. Oh my God. My spending, that debt, that $40,000 in credit card debt, is absolutely connected to my rage about what had happened. And so here's where we are. So let's put ourselves back. It's my freshman year, late 2002. I have been trying to deal with this. I hadn't yet done EMDR. I hadn't yet been diagnosed with PTSD, but I'm having a lot of PTSD symptoms, trying to just keep it together. I had basically stopped eating. I had lost a lot of weight and was at a weight that was probably the lowest I'd ever been in my life, at least 150 pounds less than I weigh now. I was doing it to try to help, help. Somebody realize that I'm not okay. I think I was getting some response, a little bit from friends and stuff, but there were specific people that I wanted to reach, my parents. I went to a basketball game. My dad was there and he said, "Wow, you look great." And somehow that just snapped something in me. Just shouldn't you be able to see that your kid is broken? They're breaking themselves so that you'll see. And of course, this is the same parent that less than a year later went into the room and smashed the shit. So we all as parents and as people, we have blind spots. We have moments of greatness and we have moments of, I don't know, maybe he wanted to tell me I looked great because I've been raped a couple of months before and he wanted me to feel good about myself being out in public. This is not about blame. It's just about the way it happened. But the way it happened was I snapped. I didn't say anything, went back to my dorm. I remember changing my clothes and getting my bag, but saying to myself, I'm going to burn it all down out loud. I literally said it. Then I drove myself to the mall. The college I went to was not very far away from where I grew up. But it's the same mall that all the spending started at. I went into every store that I could possibly have an interest in, Abercrombie, Banana Republic, Gap, Macy's, and I got their store card. That's the card I'd been counseled not to get because it has the highest interest rate. I spent up to the limit on every card I got that day. A good gigantic portion of that $40,000 debt was from that day. Started out of a place of complete and utter, hey, look at me, help me, I'm in trouble. And yet, when I finally did, a year later, say, help me, I'm in trouble, I felt the whole trauma thing. The door was basically closed. You know, every Halloween, I kind of was like, ugh, I really am not a fan of this holiday. But other than that, I tried not to think about it very much. I have been an advocate for trauma victims and survivors. I was in my school's production of the Vagina Monologues by Eve Ensler. Several years in a row, I wrote a monologue that was about what happened to me and performed it 3 years in a row in front of the people that had went to the same school as I did and so knew this whole thing. Talked about it pretty openly. I felt like I had become an advocate. I felt like I had become a survivor, like a real survivor and a thriver. And on many levels, yes, I think that's completely true. Yeah. And then there was a file. Kirby's money problem. Shame. Badness. The thing that I didn't like the most about myself. The thing that I always viewed as my flaw. Kirby's money problem. Kirby's spending. Kirby likes to shop. There I am working in the financial education field, kind of as an accident. The stock market crashed and there's not a lot of jobs. And so I found this job and it became kind of a little joke, sort of, you're doing that. And then I think it became my super strength in some ways, because how do you best design a tool for somebody who doesn't want to think about money? You get somebody to design it who doesn't want to think about money. You get someone to design it who really, really, really doesn't want to do math and can't actually do the math. So you do it for them and you make it something that makes them feel empowered at the end and makes them feel like they have some sort of step that they can take that's not too hard, but also is a step that will do something, that will actually move them forward, that will give them that space to get over the freeze part of flight or freeze, and maybe get them to ask for help or ask a question or feel more empowered, like, hey, I'm doing this with my money so I can do this, or I build on that. I think that there's a million ways that Kirby's money problem was helpful in my career and in my formation of sort of who I became. There was still this horrible shame and still spending habits that were not good and were not affordable. So many thousands of dollars of clothing, just not thinking at all. And there was shame. It's always, well, I'm going to try to make more money to cover this. But mostly to anyone else other than me, it was, I'm not going to show or talk about this with anybody. I'm going to talk about the thing that I overcame, the trauma that I overcame, the debt that I overcame, which yes, we overcame. Great. And then there I am in the hole, literally in a hole. And I'm also in a hole figuratively, because I think, as much as I would have never wanted to admit it, I felt like a fraud. I had this practically lightning bolt connection of this behavior started, yes, because of some things I learned as a little kid, that money can be fun in a store and it's fun to get those things. It's fun to put it on a card. But mostly, this behavior started out as a call for help. This behavior started as I'm going to do everything wrong so that you notice me. I'm going to purposefully do everything wrong. It didn't come from the way that I was raised. It didn't come from a bad part in me that's just rotten and likes spending and likes to have and give me. It didn't come from a part of me that's selfish. It came from a part of me that was hurt. It came from a part of me that broke and rewired itself in order to fix itself. But some of those impulses got rewired. It's like if you MacGyver a solution out of duct tape and fishing wire. That's great that you fixed it that way. But it's also made of duct tape and fishing wire. It's not the real way that a professional would fix it. So I had professional help for PTSD. I had professional help for anxiety and depression. I thought that I was the professional for financial wellness. And in many ways, yeah, sure. But I hadn't connected the thing that I felt worst about to the root cause. And without connection to the root cause, I couldn't forgive myself. Not just for what happened back then. Not just for that debt, which I paid off, but for any debt and any spending that I had done since then. In 20 years, that's a hell of a lot of different decisions and different moments and different click checkout before you can think about it. You've rationalized, click checkout, just do it. So what did that realization in the hole in my backyard get me? For the first time, I got it. I got why I did that. And the fact that I got why I did that opened up the possibility of saying, take the shame off your shoulders, put it somewhere else, and make a plan. What are we going to do? The idea, the theory, was let's work on getting the dopamine hit of click checkout. Let's get that from somewhere else. Doing that gave me the strength to avoid several of my favorite dress companies. I started to gain followers. I started to gain interaction and engagement for my business. And that was really exciting. I didn't realize, I certainly was working on it before, but I didn't realize if I worked on it a little bit more, if I worked on it in the search of that feeling, more would happen. More engagement, more followers, more good stuff, more opportunities. And that excitement was so powerful for the parts of my system that needed that chemical or what have you, but also just for my brain. I feel like the UPS driver and the FedEx driver must be like, oh my gosh, should we send her a condolence card? Like, what's going on? Because there's not all these boxes showing up at our house anymore. And yes, there are things I still want to work on a lot, but the impulse buying that I had been doing for 20 years rolled to almost a complete stop. The main reason I want to share all this is, first of all, because I think if I was in financial education for 15 years and I didn't put this together, that my spending was rooted in this trauma that I had and was so obviously rooted that I had literally said, I'm going to burn it all down before I did exactly the things that I had been taught not to do, which is pretty obvious. When you look back at it, it's so easily apparent. But I had such a big, strong brick wall up that I don't think that anyone else in the normal world, when they're not surrounded by giant slide calculators and credit counseling websites, and I don't think that they have much of a chance of putting that together. And so please, out there, if you are listening and you have something about your financial or even your eating or other parts of your life where you feel like maybe I'm doing this to ask for help, or maybe I'm doing this because something in me hurts, give yourself the grace and the belief and the honor that you yourself deserve. And first of all, ask for professional help of any kind. Second of all, if it relates to your spending and you're able to say, there's something in my spending that I'm not a fan of. Maybe you think you know why you're doing it. Maybe you don't. Maybe you haven't really thought about it. I would say that there's a pretty good chance that you're spending or you're saving or something in your finances that you don't like, a behavior that has happened that you maybe feel ashamed of, or you don't know what's happening, but you don't like it. Maybe there's a part of your past, of your childhood, or something really nasty that happened in your life that either you think you've dealt with or you think is in a completely different category. Those two things, your spending and your saving and all your financial habits, everything that makes you you, including the really, really bad stuff that we put in the other room and close the door and lock it, maybe they're connected. It's pretty easy in some ways to say, oh, my finances, my money is not connected to my brain and my heart, the things that have happened to me. It's just my money. It's such a sterile, non-feelings topic. It's so not. It's all feelings. It's all personal. Your money is more than just a card that's only taken out at fancy shopping trips or in desperation or whatever. Your money is you. We maybe don't want it to be that way, but it's how you live your life. And for me, it took 20 years to realize why I was still, despite being in this industry and knowing all the right things to do and doing a lot of right things, I still had habits that I felt so ashamed of. And I didn't connect them to this thing that happened that wasn't my fault and that rewired my brain and rewired a lot of who I am, for better or worse, and that I've had treatment for and therapy for and take medication for. I didn't want to connect those things. I don't really know why I didn't want to, because when I did, it allowed me to not only forgive myself, but to actually move on. Because carrying that hatred and all those bad emotions, I believe you can't carry anything else. Or you can kind of carry something else, but you can't carry it fully. I felt it when I put it down. I feel like I really, actually, my body felt it. Linking some behaviors about yourself that you either don't understand or don't like, and something that happened a long, long time ago is the hardest thing. And it's also the thing that, it's kind of unfortunate. It's the thing that's the most important. And that's why I shout my story from the rooftops, and I'll have my doorknobs to show anyone that wants to see the doorknobs. My name is Kirby Williams, advantagepublications.com. For a little bit more of the personal financial wellness journey, Kirby Williams on LinkedIn. You can certainly follow our Instagram at Advantage Publications. That's with an S at the end. We're on Facebook as well.
Thank you, Kirby, for sharing your story and for highlighting the importance of connecting our experiences to our financial behaviors and challenges. Healing can provide rippling effects of relief. If you're suffering from traumatic experiences of your past, I encourage you to seek the support you need to take control over your life and break free from limiting patterns. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please let us know with a like or review and stay tuned for the next one.